What's going on, team? Proof here, and today I'm coming at you with the suspected set list for the Revenge of Crusher clan event for Spikes that's going to be dropping this coming Tuesday, May the 5th, aka Cinco de Spikes as I like to call it. But the reason I say suspected card list is because Bushiroad has been showing for the global release that they're kind of pushing things up, which means that the set list that came out when the event dropped in Japan back in February or so may be different than what we're going to receive, but I'm going to review the cards that came out in the clan event that came out in Japan, because more likely than not, this is going to be what we receive. I don't think they're going to push up the limit break stuff, even though there's always a chance, but I don't think they're going to do that. But today I'm going to review the cards in the set, kind of talk about them, because if you are new to my channel or kind of discovering it recently, I enjoy Spikes the most in Vanguard, and a lot of my content is centered around that. So I'm definitely going to dig into it and give it a little more of a thorough review. But if you like these, then there's a chance I could do them for other clans in the future. So just let me know, give me your feedback. But I went to the wiki, pulled up the card information, and I'm going to go from the top rarity down to the starters and kind of just discuss the things that could pop into my mind. So without further ado, let's go and hop into it. And the first card we have is Juggernaut Maximum. And if it's a grade 3 card, and if you're fairly new into Vanguard 0, then you know that grade 3s can also be trigger units. And for Juggernaut Maximum here, this is likely going to be our heal trigger because it can go back to the deck through his Soul Blast ability. So if you use the ability, Soul Blast to go back, and then later on in the game after we've shuffled our deck, because the skill doesn't shuffle, as far as I know it doesn't shuffle at all. Kyo wasn't very nice about using the skills to help me confirm that or not, but in the event that it doesn't shuffle, there are other ways to shuffle the deck in Spikes that we can utilize to our advantage. So later on in the game after you've returned it, it can come back and be a heal trigger, and then you can also get other benefits from it as well. But it can attack for plus 5,000 power through the Soul Blast ability, which is important for hitting magical numbers. Like it can hit 11k by itself, or it can also hit 16,000 against an 11k Vanguard that got buffed up through Defense Shield. And if you give it an appropriate booster, it can hit higher than that. So it's important to keep in mind those magical numbers for scaling purposes as you are playing Spikes, because their mechanic in the first set, which is what these cards are, is a lot more of the mid-battle phase shenanigans and calling and stuff like that. And then next up we have General Safety, which I believe is going to be your primary Vanguard that you want to have on your Vanguard circle. And he says when the drive check reveals a grade 3, call the card to an open circle, and open rearguard circle means it doesn't currently have a unit in it. And then when it is boosted, it gets plus 3,000 power to the end of that battle. So since grade 3s can be triggers, if you have Juggernaut Maximum as your heal trigger, you can heal and then call out Juggernaut Maximum after that. It's important to keep in mind that you assign your trigger power before you call out the card that's checked through the grade 3. So that means if you hit the heal trigger, you do get the heal, but you can't then call Juggernaut Maximum and then apply the 5,000 power boost to the same Juggernaut Maximum. You need to apply it to something else. So that's important to activate our mid-battle phase attack calling, and it's facilitated through a card I'm going to get to in a second in Skydiver as well. And when it's boosted part is important because there's a primary booster for Spikes and Deadly Dan that I want to talk about in a little bit. So he gets that plus 2,000 power boost from it, and it allows you to hit over a 1 defense shield Vanguard. Provided it doesn't hit a trigger, but even then it's still better to have the ability to hit a trigger to hit over your opponent's Vanguard with General Safety than not. And as I alluded to, we have Skydiver here. It says when this attack hits a Vanguard, put the unit into the soul, or put this unit into the soul to activate, and then call a card from your hand. So this can be called out through General Safety, plop it down. It can attack for 11 or more depending on what booster you have behind it. It goes to soul, and you can call out a Juggernaut Maximum right behind that, which is very important because then you can because he feeds Juggernaut Maximum through his own skill, and then Maximum can Soul Blast out the previous Skydiver, attack for 16,000 or more, and then hop back to the deck for future use like I talked about. So nice little synergy going on with the 3 of them being called out through safe read or from your hand, doing the attacking, doing the calling. very nice to be able to utilize those mid battle phase calls to be able to beat your opponent down, which is what Spike's going to be doing. You're going to sacrifice a little bit of defense because a lot of your principal attacker is going to be grade 3s or Bracky, which is a grade 2 that goes back to deck later. And you're going to trade that in for be able to combo a little bit during your turn to get more than 3 attacks, which is important without sacrificing your trigger space lineup. Because in my mind, you're going to be using more of the draw triggers to go along with this, because as you're going to see in a little bit, there's going to be a certain card that we want to keep giving our trigger power to help facilitate our attacking ability, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, like I said. Next up, we have our PG in Maryland. There's not really much to talk about here because PGs are PGs across the board. If you are new to Vanguard 0, you have to know that PGs activate in certain conditions. The most common conditions when you're about to die. So if you're at 5 damage and you have a PG in hand, if your opponent can hit your Vanguard, you're going to deploy your PG. Another common scenario is if you're at 3 damage and your opponent attacks with an additional critical, is going to pop the PG as well, because the game doesn't want you to go from 3 to 5, even though in regular Vanguard you might take the risk and go from 3 to 5. It's also important to note that PGs don't activate until after the battle, which means after triggers are activated. So since critical triggers automatically go to the Vanguard, if your opponent hits a critical trigger, it goes to the Vanguard. The game will register that and then deploy the PG. So keep those things in mind, but besides that, there's not really much exciting things to talk about when it comes to a perfect guard. And next up, we got my boy Deadly Dan. He says, when it boosts the Vanguard, you can counterblast 2, put a card from your hand into your soul, and then you can call a card from your deck to an open rearguard circle. So a circle that doesn't currently have a unit in it. So this is important for our mid-battle phase stuff, because you can attack with your Juggernaut Maximum. It can go back to the deck, and you can call out something else after that, and then this helps us get our shuffle activation in, because after you search your deck, you're going to automatically shuffle your deck. So that way, if a future Juggernaut Maximum or the previous one you put back to the deck already gets redistributed into your deck, you might be able to call it out through General Safe Read in your opposite rearguard column, or the opposite, the one you call out through Deadly Dan's skill. So this is important for our mid-battle phase stuff. It helps feed soul for Juggernaut Maximum. It's one of the couple ways for us to do that in early Vanguard. And since it's your primary booster behind General Safe Read, you can easily put it back there without sacrificing your other back row rearguard places and be able to help combo out that way. But this is definitely going to be a card you want to get early in the game and often, because being able to use the cards in your hand, thanks to the mechanics of Vanguard 0, the cards in your hand outside of PGs don't matter as much. You want to be able to have cards that combo with Skydiver, and then you want to have stuff you want to just chuck into your soul to help feed and call out other Skydivers or Maximums or Brackies and stuff like that. And that's what Deadly Dan helps us with. Next up, we have Unite Attacker, the last grade 3 that's in this chunklet of cards. It says at the beginning of your main phase, Soul Charge 1, and it gets plus 2,000 power, which you're familiar with through Vortex Dragon and Longgren and stuff like that. And then the Mega Blast is when its attack hits. Look at the 5 cards from the top of your deck, call any number of them. So I'm gonna say this as nicely as possible. You will not be using Unite Attacker's Mega Blast ability. It's terrible, because we're going to be using our soul for Bracky and Juggernaut Maximum more likely than not, and going to be using your Counter Blast for Mecha Trainer, which I'm going to talk about, and Deadly Dan. You're not going to be in a scenario unless you don't have those cards, which I see it to be unlikely. As you're doing the clan event, they're going to just like fall into your lap. You're not going to be using Unite Attacker's Mega Blast for the Mega Blast. At worst, you're going to use Unite Attacker for his Soul Charge ability at the beginning of the main phase, just to get plus 2,000 power, and then it can attack into your opponent's Vanguard without needing a booster. It does make 16,000 with Deadly Dan, but Deadly Dan makes 17,000 with General Safe Read, so you kind of would rather be on General Safe Read anyway to get the additional benefit from Safe Read. So it's going to be more of a warm body to fill your 13 count grade 3 lineup to go along with Skydiver, Maximum, and Safe Read. And next up, we got my boy, the Bad Bunny, High Speed Bracky. It says when it attacks, you can Soul Blast. It's basically Juggernaut Maximum. It gets plus 5,000 power to end of that battle, and then at the end of that battle, put it to the bottom of your deck. If you don't activate the 5,000 power ability, like similar to Juggernaut Maximum. If you don't activate it, it could just attack and stay on the board. So it's not a requirement to attack with the Soul Blast ability. You have the option to not use it. But this is another card that can attack and then get out the way for General Save Free to call the top card of your deck if it's a grade 3. So it helps you formulate your multi-attack patterns from there. Outside of that, it's not going to be too exciting because it does the same things as Maximum does, except it's a grade 2, so it can stick around if you don't want to use the Soul Blast ability. It can be an attack soaker on your opponent's turn because this is a grade 2 with Intercept. But it's going to be a card you want to have at the ready to be able to combo out in case you are in a situation where you need to start comboing out things. Next up we have Spike Bouncer. It says when an attack by another of your units hits a Vanguard, plus 3000 power to end of turn. So this card is interesting because it can help keep getting power, but in the nature of Vanguard 0, it might be hard to find certain situations for it to start gaining power, because if your opponent has multiple intercepts, it's gonna have to attack last, or it's gonna have to attack in the middle, which means it's not gonna get the buff from the Vanguard getting buffed getting hit most likely, unless you start comboing out with your other column. And from there, you're gonna have to use it as a rearguard buster first, unless you combo it with something like a Bracky or a Maximum to use the Soul Blast ability to attack one of your opponent's rearguards, which is something you can do. Put it back to the deck and then call out something through General Save Free or Skydiver in that column, and then start attacking with Spike Bouncer last after you've cleared out their front row. So it's a fairly awkward card, but it's still something you could probably use in like a 1-2 of slot or more, depending on how you value Bracky or some of the other grade 2s. But in my mind, it's gonna be something you kind of want to use as like a tech option, because can be fairly cumbersome. And then on your opponent's turn, it's only an 8000 power body, which can be knocked out by any of the vanilla attackers. So it's kind of a liability there. So without as huge of an upside as some of your other cards as well. And next up we got Double Summoner, which is a card with low attack power but has a lot of potential upside. So when it's placed, reveal the top card of your deck. If that card is a grade 2 or less, call the card. If not, shuffle your deck. So this is a way, at worst, it's a free shuffle, which means it helps redistribute cards you put to the bottom, like your Brackies, your Maximums, etc. And at the best of it, it's a +1 for the call. And with the changed ratios in Vanguard 0, you don't have to worry about grade 0s being checked anymore, which means your deck is 66% callable cards and then 33% misses, which is your grade 3s. If you take into account like drawing your grade 1s and 2s early, you're still in a situation where 60% or so of the time you're gonna hit with Double Summoner to get a +1 on your board early on in the game, which for spikes is really important to help kind of snowball or protect yourself from your opponent, because it's still a grade 2. Assuming it's on your rearguard circle, it can soak up an attack from your opponent. So unlike Spike Bounce, like I talked about, with this low power, it has that huge potential upside, especially if you go Summoner into Summoner and both those Summoner, or in the second Summoner hit something, then you've pretty much committed 1 card and ended up with 3 cards on the board, which is a nice little swing and advantage for you, especially if you call something like Deadly Down without having to use your Mecha Trainer to find it. So very interesting card. I think it's going to be found in like a 4 slot just because of the increased ratios and increased percentage that it's going to be hitting thanks to said ratios. Next up, we got Reckless Express. It is the grade 1 version of Bracky and Maximum. It is nice to have it as a booster early on that can slide up and become a runaway attacker if you need to have that ability to get the extra attack in before comboing off with Save Free, Deadly Dan, Skydiver, etc. Outside of that, it's not a very exciting card. It is nice. I love the artwork. But it does basically the same things as Bracky and Maximum. Next up, we have our 10k Vanilla in Treasured Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And it is nice to be able to have just the 10k body early on for defensive purposes. It might be your main grade 2 ride, because that way you don't fall prey to a 9k vanilla swing on your opponent's turn. So you definitely in my mind, you're going to definitely be playing 4 of these, just because of that extra 10k body defense early on is very important. And then we got Fierce Leader Zachary. When its attack hits a Vanguard, Soul Blast 1 to activate, draw a card, and at the end of that battle, return this unit to the bottom of your deck. In the nature of Vanguard Zero, this card in my mind isn't going to be played because the draw is nice, but the only thing you're going to be trying to draw for are either PGs or grade 3s you are lacking. But in the build, to do that, you have to give up the intercept, which means that it may not be something worthwhile to do in the later portions of the game where the intercepts are highly important. It's most useful against Kagero because blockade is a thing, so it having intercept doesn't matter. But I would rather fill my deck out with other cards that are usable more often than not, as opposed to having Zachary, which is only useful or most useful in a matchup against blockade / Kagero. So it is a nice card. I have a huge soft spot for it from the TCG, the paper game, but in the Vanguard Zero environment, I don't think it's gonna see much play because it just removes itself and you rather keep the interceptor around. And then we got my boy, the bread himself, Wonder Boy, 8K vanilla. The most important thing with him is that it does hit 21K with general safe reads, plus 3,000 power boost. However, it does conflict with Deadly Dan in that booster slot as your Vanguard, so it only really matters late in the game, at which point you're probably already hitting. Let's try to hit over, say, a 6 damage shield, and you're trying to hit magical numbers there. That's when it's most useful, but it's still gonna be competing for that back row spot with Deadly Dan and a card I have yet to get to in Spike Brothers Assault Squad. So it's gonna be fighting for that grade 1 space, especially with Reckless Express being in the set now as well. And we got Gyro Slinger, Counterblast 1 to activate, gets plus 1,000 power to end of turn. Nice little interesting space filler card. As your deck fleshes out, this is going to be a card you're going to start ticking away at because it doesn't have as much utility as some of your other cards. It is nice. It could hit Counterblast 2 to get plus 2 to become 9,000 power, which can be nice in some niche situations, but you'd rather be using 2 Counterblasts with Deadly Dan to call something else out. Then we got Cyclone Blitz. When it attacks, Soul Blast 1 to get plus 3,000 power to end of that battle. So it's like a bit like small version of your Brackies, Reckless, Juggernaut Maximums. I don't think it's going to find a space because it caps at 9,000 power before triggers, which isn't very exciting. It does stick around, which is something important to have, but your soul is a precious resource that you'd rather be using for something outside of Cyclone Blitz. So I don't think it's going to see a whole lot of use in and of itself. Then we got my boy, Big Boy from V-Series. If you've seen my videos, you know how much I loved V-Series, Gary Gannon. He's back in Vanguard Zero with his old effect, which is basically just a filter. So if the attack that it boosted hits, discard a card to draw a card. It could be nice for digging for PGs or grade 3s and stuff like that, or extra intercepts. But the best way for it to hit is behind the Vanguard, which, as I talked about with Wonder Boy, is occupied pretty exclusively by Deadly Dan for the foreseeable future, at least until Deadly Emperor comes out. Then you might see more Gary Gannons and stuff like that start to come into play, or more Wonder Boys as well. And then we have arguably the most important non-Vanguard booster for Spikes in Spike Brothers Assault Squad. It got buffed from being 4,000 to 6,000 power, just like I think Cray Soldier is its name from Nova Grapplers. But when it attack, it boosted hits, stand this unit back up. So why that's so important is that in the mechanics of Vanguard Zero, the garden doesn't happen until PGs start coming into play, which means your cards like Bracky, Juggernaut Maximum, Skydiver are more likely to hit to activate Spike Brothers Assault Squad, which was a card that was very useless in the TCG side of things with the Garden, because you can easily just stop the attack from hitting and prevent the boosted or the restanding from happening. But in this scenario, you can give it trigger boost. So if you attack with your Vanguard before you attack with your Assault Squad side, you can give the power buff from your triggers to Assault Squad. And if you have combos ready to go, you can pop off with Skydiver into Maximum, into things like that. And that's why it's so important to have, because each trigger helps it scale over your opponent hitting a defensive shield, which means that you can reliably get more attacks off on your opponent than you otherwise could have without the trigger boost. So those are things that we want to keep in mind as you're assigning trigger powers or your attacking order for the turn, is to keep in mind that Assault Squad could be ready to fire off with a sequence of cards thanks to the likes of Skydiver or Deadly Dan to call out Skydiver and things like that. You can keep that side open as your Vanguard attacks, activate Deadly Dan, call out Skydiver. It does remove a trigger from your deck, but it does give you a free shuffle in through Deadly Dan. You might get a trigger anyway, pop it on Assault Squad, and now the Assault Squad plus Skydiver makes 22,000 power, which helps hit over your opponent hitting a defensive trigger, because it at most it gives 10,000 power, which as a Vanguard is 11,000, it goes to 21,000. So that still hits 22. It hits, activates, goes into Soul. Then you can call out Bracky or Maximum at that time, and then keep attacking that way. It helps you get additional attacks that you otherwise would not have received. So that's why I think it's going to be the most important Vanguard boosting unit to have in your back row. And it's going to be a card you're definitely going to have 4 of them, because it could pop. Kagero could remove it. Dark Regulars can remove it through a Mon skill, things like that. So you want to be able to refill your Assault Squad to help keep that combo potential rolling. My boy Mecha Trainer, aka Mecha the King, basically all the goodness that he was in previous, he's now back. He has Forerunner, and then just like Conroe, Counterblast 1, retire it, and get a grade 1 from your deck, grade 1 or less from your deck, even though there's no grade 0s that can be in your deck right now for spikes. Basically, that's going to be your PG Finder, your Deli Dan Finder. Ideally, you want to play higher ratios of Deli Dan and Assault Squad, and then use Mecha Trainer to fetch you a PG. Now, if you already have a lot of PGs in your hand, you don't have to get one. Pluck out one of your Deli Dans or Assault Squads, and then put it in the back row to help start doing this thing. But incredible card. It's going to be your starter, because you get it for free as the event pops up. So you already have it available. You don't have to get it yourself later on. It's just already free for you. And then the other one is Psychic Mel, which is Counterblast 1, put it to the Soul to activate. Look at the 5 cards from the top of your deck, put a grade 3 from your hand, or put a grade 3 into your hand. It does add Soul, which is nice for your Soul Blast cards, but what Mecha Trainer does is far and away better, in my opinion. That I would rather just stick with Mecha Trainer to get that PG, as opposed to getting the extra Soul, and you might not miss right. In a world we have 13 grade 3s, yeah, you might miss Safe Read from time to time, but I would not want to increase the odds of trying to find it through Psychic Mel, as opposed to playing Mecha Trainer and then guaranteeing my survivability with getting a perfect guard to my hand. But that'll do it for all the cards that I would suspect to be in the Revenge of Crusher clan event that's coming up soon. But if you enjoyed this, let me know. I'm really excited for spikes. I can't wait to play. I'm just going to just jam Vanguard 0 as hard as possible to get a deck completed day 1. But in the next video, I'm going to talk about the deck that I have in theory, what I'm going to be trying to achieve day 1. So stay tuned for that. And to the next one, peace, be easy.